Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to our PhD seminar series in business management. And today I want to address the idea of getting a sense of the PhD terrain. And I know that you have enrolled on this PhD program and you are interested and you are very enthusiastic. And I know that you are waiting to see what will unfold on the PhD program. Now, on this program, you will be able to learn a number of things. And I hope the things that you are going to learn will certainly help you in your daily activities. And these things will change the way you have been thinking over the years. So in this lecture of the PhD seminar series, you will be required to read a number of books, and I'm giving them to you as a reference text for this particular workshop that we are having. I want you to read the book by Blackster Hughes and Ntayi, 1998. That is the Academic Career Handbook. I want you to read another book by Bowen, and that is 1992, In Pursuit of the PhD program. And this is published by Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press. I want you to read the book Lovitz, 1996, Leaving the Ivory Tower, a sociological analysis of the causes of departure from doctoral study. And of course, this is published by the University of Michigan, ladies and gentlemen. There's another book I want you to read, which is Sykes, 1988. And this is Profscam, Professors and the Demise of Higher Education, Washington, D.C., Reagan Gateway. Now, those are just a few of the books that I've highlighted, but certainly we are going to put all these books somewhere as your reading list, and you'll be able to access the material that you need. So, as I said earlier on, welcome to the PhD program. Welcome to the community of scholars. Welcome to the PhD bench. Not yet on the bench, but I know that you want to join. Therefore, welcome, and I'm sure you can still see the bench just far away from you, but you'll be there anyway very soon. So, I'm certainly welcoming you to the program, and I'll begin by giving you the introduction. I want to introduce you to these PhD workshops. Right. Remember, our topic today is getting a sense of the PhD terrain. You need to understand the terrain, right? It's no use for you to go out to the battlefield without understanding the terrain. If you don't understand the terrain, then you'll be badly hit and you'll be defeated. So these PhD workshops that I will be facilitating will serve as a guide for you to progress in your planning, in your writing, and defending your PhD thesis. Now, these workshops as well aim at grounding you in the functional areas of business in which you intend to undertake a PhD. And therefore, these may include, but not limited to the ones I'm going to mention, marketing, financial economics, auditing and investigation, entrepreneurship and management, training, human growth and development, supply chain management, name it, HR in general, organizational behavior, that kind of thing. So these workshops intend to ground you in your areas where you intend to undertake your PhD, and also to tell you what others have gone through, the experiences that have been shared by other people that you are following. Now, of course, in this case, a case could be made that doctoral students are required to be the most rigorous researchers. And I want you to bear this at the back of your mind, because if you don't, you'll get a shock of your life. So as researchers, right, you are expected to be resourceful, seeking information in a wide array of sites. And as a participant of these workshops, you are a researcher, and you know that very well. Writing your doctoral thesis will supplement material or materials available at your university. And what you are going to write will not supplant any institutional documents or explanatory requirements. So this is very important. So try to read while at the university. Try to read all publications from your university which enumerate the steps in the PhD process, as well as any academic calendars which might offer clues about mandated activities, ladies and gentlemen. Also get to know their frequency of occurrence, whether these will occur once in a semester, or they will occur monthly or weekly or annually. Try to also get to know the activities, the PhD activities, which may include maybe PhD alumni, attending class, coursework papers and presentations, preliminary examinations, developing and submitting PhD concept papers. All of those things are certainly articulated in those documents that are available at the university. So if you will be sitting coursework papers, all of that will be made known to you. The presentations you'll be making in class, preliminary examinations that you have to go through. If you are required to develop and submit PhD concept papers, still that information is contained in documents that are kept at the university. Developing and submitting PhD, presenting your PhD proposals, again, all these things are articulated, including developing and submitting your proposals, undertaking a pilot study, and the requirements for you to proceed to the next level after defending your pilot study results, and so forth, including the oral defenses. Now, of course, as I've already said, try to familiarize yourself with the university and get hold of any document that you think is very relevant. The university graduate handbook is a good starting point, but it doesn't stop there. You can start from there, look at the university website, go to the university website, and more so to the graduate school section, right? You will have information, or even your department website. Look for brochures, the pamphlets and flyers. Look at the university board notices. You can look at the writings and advertisements in the campus newspapers and program newsletters. So make sure that you do not ignore any document that is produced by the university, because there might be important messages for you which you should not lose sight of. You can also explore the materials available from the graduate office, You can go to the office of the Dean of Graduate Studies or Dean of Graduate Research Studies, depending on the terminology that is being used in your university. And all these will describe the requirements that you will be going through. Inquire about the PhD program meetings, inquire about the informal gatherings, inquire about the community or practice meetings if you have them. Then again, look for advertisement materials which may offer a map of what to expect at the university. So in these workshops, as I've already told you, of course, emphasizing now these aspects, there are two objectives of these workshops. First and foremost is to provide an overview of the PhD terrain, because I want you to understand the PhD terrain, and of course an explanation of all the steps in the process of writing a PhD thesis. And then second, we shall be providing a step-by-step guide to writing your PhD thesis proposals and prepare you for oral defense, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there are 4 major components for our PhD workshop, which correspond to the several stages involved in one, advancing a thesis, because as a PhD student, you will be developing your arguments from time to time, and then you will certainly advance those arguments. Therefore, I will take you through those aspects of advancing your thesis, developing and successfully defending a PhD proposal. If you are not required to write a concept paper at this stage, because you already admitted you get into the PhD proposal. But I know that especially on many taught programs, you begin with a concept paper, and then certainly you proceed on the proposal. But the concept paper stage could also be missed out. So the workshops that I'm giving you will take you through so that you understand how to advance your argument, develop successfully, and defend your proposal, because you must defend your proposal. Do not think that you just write anything and submit and then wait for feedback to be told that you go to the field. No, this is your document. Then, of course, the other aspect is developing research instrument, because after the proposal, you must develop instruments, and you must validate these instruments. Then you must write and defend your pilot study results. And then, of course, lastly, and this is the 5th element, writing and defending your PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. So initially, you will certainly go through these aspects I've already told you, getting a sense of the PhD terrain, preparing your PhD research, and doing your PhD research study. So why don't we then go to starting a PhD thesis journey. Now, I just want to remind you that nothing you have done in your academic career is quite like writing a PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. And we usually get a challenge, especially when you receive a new cohort of PhD students, and these students have in their minds a thinking that a PhD is an extension of a master's thesis or master's dissertation. And I want to say that is a mistaken view, and that's why I'm telling you that nothing you have done in your academic career is quite like writing a PhD thesis. But there are resemblances to coursework papers, certainly, and there are certain things that we can learn from the coursework papers that we can actually transfer to the PhD. But at this level, remember, you will be required to unlearn some of the things that you have learned over time. You will be required to learn afresh, and then later on to relearn, ladies and gentlemen. So drawing on your wealth of experiences with the coursework papers that you have already done, you will be able to utilize that knowledge and expedite your PhD thesis writing. You have a considerable familiarity with writing coursework. I know that very well because you've written many papers and you've sat many exams and you have made a number of presentations, even the previous semesters or modules on your PhD program. For those who are undertaking a taught PhD program, you have written papers and you've presented those papers in the class in form of workshops, right? So there is some bit of considerable familiarity with what you are doing. With those proficiencies of writing coursework papers in place, it is now useful to bring them to a level of consciousness. Now, writing a coursework paper entails not only writing per se, but necessitates extensive reading and learning. And this is what you are going to do prior to and during the writing process, because reading is very important and searching for materials is also quite important. So the same holds true for your PhD thesis. Your learning and understanding of the topic, right, you are studying will be magnified many times in the process of writing your PhD thesis if you read widely and also consult widely. So writing a coursework paper promotes learning, as does writing a PhD thesis. But in the process of writing your PhD thesis, you learn many things. You learn more about your discipline. You learn more about writing to an audience beyond the one professor who taught the course, extending to your PhD thesis committee, and ultimately your academic discipline globally. So do not forget that you'll be given a doctoral committee that will give you guidance to successfully undertake your PhD and complete. So you are not writing to your professor alone, right? So the professor that taught you a particular module is not the only person who is going to judge the quality of your PhD. The members of the doctoral committee have a say in your work. And also the international, or what you call the scholarly audience, have something to do. And that's why there is a requirement that before you graduate, probably on your PhD program, you must have published 2 papers in an internationally referred journal. So what we are telling you at that material time is that yes, you have got a PhD thesis committee that must guide your operations, but you also have your academic, right? We call them those fellows who actually guard, right? And they are gatekeepers because they guard the quality of the knowledge that is produced in that particular section or area where you are undertaking your PhD. So as you can see, you will learn to organize large chunks of information. You will learn to do original research. You will learn to organize your time so that you are as productive as you want to be. And you can see here, most PhD thesis writers find this experience amazing in retrospect. Now, writing a PhD thesis is a true learning experience writ large. A contrast between the coursework papers you've written and the PhD thesis is useful here. And clearly, you have been successful in your paper writing, and therefore there's no reason why you should not be successful in this case. And besides, you've passed so many levels, and you've scored highly. So at this level, this PhD training that you're undergoing will help you bring together the pieces and chunks of information that you have been exposed to throughout your training, ladies and gentlemen. So the successes you have accumulated over the span of your academic career on smaller projects provide the confidence that you can meet this new challenge of writing your PhD thesis and going through the ropes of a PhD. And of course, that confidence is very important. And you know that a PhD thesis is a lengthy document which is written by a graduate student in the process of completing a doctoral degree. You also know that writing a PhD thesis includes reporting on research, includes working with a committee and the chair. I'm talking about the doctoral committee and the chair of that committee, and having orals. We call this viva voce at the end of the day. So chances are that one of your strengths as a student has been your ability to write acceptable, even highly praised coursework papers. So you appropriately expect to draw on that experience in your PhD thesis writing. And of course, in this case, you might assume that the coursework preceding your PhD thesis prepares you for writing your PhD thesis. So give attention to the courseworks if you are still doing some courseworks, because and do not be tempted to go to the various textbooks and just Xerox chunks of materials from there, because that is plagiarism. So what you have to do is to pick ideas from those particular journal articles and the books that you are reading, and make sure that you advance your arguments appropriately. So you might also assume, ladies and gentlemen, that coursework preceding your PhD is not very important. But at this mature time, I'm telling you, it is very important because it prepares you, particularly thinking of all the paper writing required in your courses, because you've done a lot of this, and clearly those experiences will be useful, ladies and gentlemen. But it's important to understand that writing a PhD thesis is both different from and also similar to a coursework paper. So I know you've done that, and you're going to borrow experiences from your courseworks, but do not trust that knowledge 100%, and do not think that that's the only thing that there is. So you need to really think through very, very hard, and you must work very hard. So those experiences will be useful, but it's important to understand that writing a PhD thesis is both different and similar to a coursework paper, ladies and gentlemen. So we now certainly look at this small aspect of writing a PhD thesis. If you pick any PhD proposal or PhD thesis from your library, and I want to encourage you to go and pick these books from the library, and look at the title page, ladies and gentlemen. So if you look at the title page, you will have access to useful information. I call this additional information about PhD thesis. The title page gives useful insights into the total document if we examine it very closely. And let me just give you an example of some of the information that you find on the PhD thesis front page, or what you call the title page, right? And you need to write down these things, because this information is very important, right? So one of the things that you'll find on the title page is the spacing of information on the page, right? Now that spacing of information on the page suggests the PhD thesis is a formal document with a prescribed format, distinct from most of other writings that we have seen, including your coursework papers and the ones you have produced for discussions. The second thing you'll note from that cover page is the use of technical terms in the title. For example, you may have a topic, right, but somewhere you'll have a colon. Somebody says the case of manufacturing firms, the case of the service sector, right? Now that writing suggests the text is expressed And that text that is expressed there is addressed to a small subset of our society which is familiar with the technical language. And the title of the PhD thesis is highly focused. From the title, we can identify unique characteristics, right? For instance, there are certain aspects which tell us that there is analysis of data. There is analysis of data. For example, if the topic is a qualitative analysis of customers' perception of service recovery in commercial banks, right? So a special type of analysis will be reported in this case, and that is a qualitative analysis that is being reported. The source for the data, right, which informs the study is also identified, right? So in this case, the perceptions of customers are the ones that are going to be studied. The research reports on a highly focused issue, right? And in this case, only the issue of customer perceptions of service recovery will be investigated, excluding, for example, any documentations of the service quality, right? From the same example of the topic I've given you, the data are collected in a restricted setting. The site for the service recovery is restricted to places identified. In our case, it is actually the commercial banks, ladies and gentlemen. The other aspect that you'll find on most of the title page of PhD thesis is the academic history of the degree of the candidate, right? This information can be seen, and this information will be seen from the paper, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why you'll find things like the academic history of the candidate, but the PhD thesis, right, in this case, is a product of collaboration among a number of people. And if you look at the cover page, you will see the doctoral committee, right? The doctoral committee will be indicated, and along with the PhD student. Now, each member of the doctoral committee holds a doctoral degree. That information is presented, and one of these individuals on the committee is certainly identified as the chair, and that's the chair of the doctoral committee. The PhD thesis is not only requirements. It's not the only requirement for the doctoral degree. There are additional requirements. For example, you're going to use a computer or a word processor in the writing, or at least in the presentation of the PhD thesis. And all the information must be presented neatly. And again, just by studying the cover page, one slice of data, we will be able to identify important elements of the PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, this is not the only source of that information that you need. There are so many other sources. I've already told you. Pick any document from the university, right, and supplement it with this kind of thing. So you need to look for one of the PhD, completed PhD thesis, so that you get to understand how things are supposed to be done. We need also to compare information presented in one PhD and other PhD thesis done elsewhere. I know at your university, if you are studying at Makerere University, yes, documents do exist, but if you also go to Uganda Matters University, you also see another format. If you go to University of Cape Town, you find another one. If you go to Cairo University, International University, or the American University in Cairo, you also find a different format. So I want to encourage you to pick as many PhD dissertations completed at different universities as possible, and look at their title pages. And most of them will have lengthy descriptive titles, names of the doctoral committee members, a statement about the partial fulfillment of requirements for a degree, formal professional presentation style, etc., etc. So all these are very important, of course, with some level of variations from one university to another university. So when we combine our insights from dissertation samples from different universities, we know that these are title pages from PhD thesis, not PhD thesis proposals or even term papers. So PhD thesis may use different research methodologies. PhDs may use different styles of the presentation, of course suggesting a required format rather than a unique one created by each individual, and that's what we do for what you call term papers or coursework papers, whatever it is, and the format in a coursework is determined by your professor. But if you are doing a PhD, everything is determined by the doctoral committee and, of course, the international scholarly audience where you are contributing knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. So there are also several contrasts, some of which might indicate subtitle differences in the relationship between the student and the committee. And these nuances may have little import for you, or they may suggest a specific stance which you should consider adopting in your conversation with your doctoral committee. For example, the role of the committee is not, for instance, articulated. You will pick the document, fine, but the role is not articulated, so you may have to go to the office concerned with the PhD so that they tell you what the doctoral committee is supposed to do, what the chair is responsible for, the kind of roles and responsibilities. And again, in some sample PhD thesis, the doctoral committee members are listed below, the student's name implying that they supported the student's work, whereas in other samples from other universities, the positioning of the doctoral committee on top of the page may suggest that the committee directed the PhD thesis. So it's very important that you pick these things, ladies and gentlemen. So the prominence of the student's name may also differ from one university to another, especially in terms of how these things appear on the PhD thesis title page. In one sample, the doctoral student's name is all in uppercase letters, equivalent to the emphasis given on the title of the PhD thesis. In another sample, the name appears in upper and lowercase letters, similar to the listing for the committee. In one institution, the doctoral degrees, for example, PhD held by the committee members are noted, whereas the other institutions seem to emphasize the fact that the committee is comprised of professors. In some PhD thesis samples, as you will discover very soon, there is a notation of the degrees previously awarded to the doctoral candidate. These sample title pages certainly, as I've already said, ladies and gentlemen, offer us an initial sense of the many issues involved in writing a PhD thesis or proposal. So let's just try to contrast a little bit your coursework paper versus the PhD thesis that you're going to write, ladies and gentlemen. I've been reliably informed that you are currently being grounded in a number of business-related areas where you intend to certainly graduate with a PhD. Some of you are doing energy economics, others are doing auditing and investigations, and others are doing financial economics, others are probably doing marketing, others are doing entrepreneurship, others are doing accounting and finance, others are doing training, human growth and development, others are doing procurement and supply chain management, others are studying entrepreneurship, others are studying, for instance, ICT, whatever the case, right? So you have been given, I've been told that you were given books which you are supposed to review. Please make sure that you read these books. I know that some students, when they get on the PhD program, they think it is the responsibility of the professor to read the books and then come to class and start explaining these issues to the students. And then the role of a student is to simply write it down and cram those notes and reproduce. Far from it. This is not what is done at the PhD. At the PhD, you pick a book and read it from cover to cover. Right, you crack that book. If you don't understand it the first time, you read it the second time, understand it. Pick arguments from the book. So I want to encourage you, if you are given these workshop books or the books you are going to use for your PhD workshops, please, again, depending on the area of specialty where you want to go, please pick these books, read these books with a critical mind, identify emerging research themes or probably ideas or arguments or theses from these books. Go to the internet, identify and download relevant scholarly journal publications, starting with the scientific ones. And you can easily get those scientific, because in every discipline, you've got those fellows who have championed knowledge in those particular areas. Please start with those ones and then later on read the general ones, right? And at the end of the day, when you pick those ideas, use the ideas to write a coursework paper which you present to a panel of experts in a workshop setting, and then they will critique your papers. I know that some of us are not used to critiquing. When people critique and dismiss your arguments, you start saying that these fellows do not like me at all. So you think that a PhD is about liking. And I just want to inform you that you have to forget all about that, and you need to learn to grow at this material time. So in writing your coursework papers, certainly you'll follow what your professor has directed you to do in the main, and your professors will monitor your pace, and many, if not all, of the sources which you are going to use or you refer to in your paper will be suggested or were already suggested by your professor, and the topic of your paper will also probably be predetermined by your professor, so you'll have a discussion with him and you have a deadline to meet. Now, your coursework paper usually comprise one element in a total evaluation of your work in the entire PhD course, and eventually resulting in the grade which your professor will enter and deposit with the dean, and of course, I mean here the faculty dean and the registrar, which indicates that you have successfully completed the course. Now, whether you receive a grade A or a grade B in your coursework, that may not be the most important outcome, right? Now, in a term paper or courseworks, when you get a grade, A or B or C, whatever it is, that will be the most important, and you will have reached that kind of terminal stage of that particular paper. For a PhD thesis, that's not what it is. For most, right, as you can see, when they complete their coursework papers and they get a very nice grade, right, they have a sigh of relief. And the completion of that requirement yields great relief and satisfaction. And a few students concern themselves with making sense of the course in the context of other studies. So at this time, we have sufficient information, ladies and gentlemen, to document our growing understanding of some of the differences and similarities between coursework papers and the PhD thesis. Now, in addition to the insights we have developed from the analysis that we have just gone through, there are several other related issues which become noteworthy in our comparison, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to give you these issues. We shall begin with number one. When writing a PhD thesis, you're expected to break some new ground. So you should know, as you move into your PhD, as you Certainly try to get this transition is very important, and you meet it as you transit from courseworks into the PhD thesis. Remember, you writing this PhD thesis is a demonstration that you are going to break some new ground. You're expected to contribute to the evolving knowledge base of a discipline through your PhD thesis. In a coursework paper, you may explore some areas in depth. There is literal need to determine if others have taken this route, whether they have gone through this route before. In fact, everyone in your class may be writing on the same topic. In writing your PhD thesis, you conduct an intensive data search, ensuring that the project you are mounting is different from what has already been done. You'll bring a new perspective into the area. You will study with the new lenses, becoming aware of different phenomenon. Your study will contribute to the expanding literature in your field. And therefore, it is very, very important for you to indicate what we call the theoretical gap in your work, ladies and gentlemen. The second aspect, which is also important and unique to a PhD thesis, is that when you write a coursework paper, you are aware of the professor's biases, and you probably deal with these in the writing of your project. When you are writing your PhD thesis, you have many readers of your work, right? Remember, when you are doing courseworks, yes, you are only writing to your professor. If he invites another person or other people, then that is very good. But rarely do professors invite so many people in class during the facilitation of a particular course. But if you're writing a PhD thesis, you have many readers of your work, and I want to emphasize this point. And potentially these are readers with the different and conflicting theoretical orientations, and that's why you must be thorough, right? It will be essential for you to deal with this potential conflict, discussing competing theories and ideas, and ultimately your interpretation of data will need to reflect an understanding of multiple viewpoints. So the other aspects which the third one, that in contrast to your term papers, which probably drew on sources recommended by your professor, your PhD thesis will reflect your resourcefulness at identifying particular sources. In fact, in the process of writing your PhD thesis, you become the expert. In contrast to your term papers, where your professor typically was more knowledgeable than you on the topic and the aspects. So at this material time, you become an expert. And those are things that should be prepared to pick from this PhD program and the workshops that we are undertaking. Now, again, number 4, remember that a coursework paper is returned to the student with no record of that paper remaining at the institution. So at the university, you may not find any paper. That particular paper that you did will not be deposited at the university. But certainly, if you are doing a PhD, your PhD thesis will be available to the entire academic community through PhD thesis abstracts, international, and through interlibrary loan, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So number 5, again, which is very important for us to note, is that it is very important to acknowledge that your relationship with the doctoral committee members, right, will influence the progress that you make. But if you are a kind of person that is not bothered and you only work with one member of the doctoral committee for, let's say, around 6 months or 1 year without seeing the other members, and remember your doctoral committee will have around 5 people or 6 people, and if you later on you are reminded by the dean of the faculty that you must go or maybe a PhD coordinator that you must go and meet the other members of the doctoral committee. And then you start looking out for them. If one took around 6 months, if the other remaining 5 doctoral committee members, each one of them takes about 5 months in a sequence, then of course you'll be talking about 6 times 5, and those are 30 months. And 30 months, you'll be talking about how many years? You'll be talking about close to 3 years or 2.5 years. And that is time lost and time wasted. And you can imagine, because you'll be given the doctoral committee members even before you go to the field. So at the stage of undertaking your proposal, that's when you are given the doctoral committee members. So if it takes you 2.5 years at the proposal stage, and it takes you another 3 years, probably, or another 2.5 years or 3 years at the PhD level, that is PhD thesis, final thesis level, you see that you already have 5 years before you submit your thesis for examination and before you defend. So you may end up taking 7 years on the PhD program or 10 years on the PhD program. And the tendency for students is actually to complain and at the end of the day blame the doctoral committee members and the supervisors for failing to work, even when they themselves have failed to do the right thing at that material time. The 6th point that you need to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that when writing coursework papers, you wrote that paper independently. Writing your PhD thesis requires collaboration with your doctoral committee members. A term paper, again, is one short deal, usually, and you turn in the paper, it is read and evaluated, and sometimes returned with a grade or comments. With a PhD thesis, typically there are numerous drafts, and you must be ready for those drafts. No longer is it acceptable to get a passing grade or hopeful comments at this level. Now you need to respond to those comments, right? Whatever comment every doctoral committee member gives you, you must respond to it, and you must report back and give a report on what you've done to each, or what you've done with each of the comments given to you by the doctoral committee members or by the doctoral committee in general. Now, these remarks and questions become directions for improving your text, as well as guidelines for future drafts and future parts of your PhD thesis. Your PhD thesis is a work in progress, so if you are given a comment and you simply keep the document, you'll have a problem. But I will advise that whenever you submit and you are given a comment, start right away addressing those particular comments. And if there is any comment that you don't understand, the doctoral committee chair is available, or the doctoral committee members are also available. You can consult them. Your committee's input seeks to promote the possibility of attaining some level of perfection. So these are very important. And the 8th aspect for you to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that in contrast to a term paper or a coursework paper, which usually must be completed within the time frame of a 1 semester or probably period allotted to a module, your PhD thesis has no such time limits. One of the distinguishing characteristics of a PhD is that it goes through multiple drafts before it finally receives the approval of the committee. In fact, frequently there is a PhD thesis proposal which needs to be approved prior to the initiation of the PhD thesis research project, ladies and gentlemen. So the proposal then serves as a start for the PhD thesis, which is revised to document the actual study. And ladies and gentlemen, the 9th point for you to note is that a PhD thesis is frequently developed chapter by chapter, or chapter part by chapter part, with the student gradually working towards completing the total document while receiving comments along the way. But coursework papers are usually submitted for evaluation in their entirety. So I'm trying to use these two coursework papers and a thesis. For you who are required to do both, certainly you know what I mean, because you are going to write both. And for some of you who are simply doing your PhD by thesis only, then the term paper does not apply. But you may actually draw from your past experience where you had to write term papers, where you had to write coursework papers and presentations, the workshops from your master's level. So that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, or 10, while writing a term paper, it is a fairly private experience, with the professors typically being the sole reader of your paper. Your PhD thesis becomes a public document. Others may engage you in a conversation about your study. Those on your committee will talk to you about your work. Your PhD program peers will talk with you about your progress and your findings. And even on the last day, when you have the orals, right, what we call the public defense, I can assure you the public will also engage you in your PhD work. And you will, from time to time, be required to identify workshops and conferences and journals where you're going to present your work, ladies and gentlemen. So, and maybe also professional organizations may invite you from time to time to go and talk to them. So those major aspects. Maybe let me add you about 1 or 2 more points. I know I had said finally number 10, but I think you need to consider these other points because they are equally important. Friends and associates outside of your program will ask about your progress in completing your PhD thesis. When friends hear that you're working on a PhD thesis, they may engage you in extended conversations about your topic, and unusual occurrence when you're writing a term paper, nobody may actually ask you what you're working on. So ladies and gentlemen, I think let me not really spend too much time in this lecture. I'm going to give you or I will be taking you through the second part of the same lecture. But right now, I'm giving you a table that presents all the arguments that we have been discussing, and I'm sure you can see the table on the screen here. That is our table 1 for our workshop. Please go through these aspects one by one. As you can see, in many respects, your successes in writing coursework papers were brief forays, preparation for the extended journal of writing your PhD thesis, and of course, to provide you with additional confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to strongly urge you to go to your university library and find the section where the PhD theses are located. Choose one written by someone you know, by a potential PhD thesis chair, and at random, please pick that particular document and try to read it and try to understand that document. And while at this time you are a tourist, I must say, because you are not yet grounded and you haven't probably understood very well what it means to undertake a PhD, ultimately it will become your native land. You'll value the library, you'll like the library. And the best way to change from being a tourist to becoming a native is to put down roots and stay for a while, becoming familiar and comfortable with the customs of the trade, ladies and gentlemen. But your first 30 minutes trip will whet your desire to learn more, and you return many times to this section of the library for advice, for confirmation, and of course the number of other things that you will be required to do, ladies and gentlemen. So again, this diagram is very important for you, and I hope you've had an opportunity to look at the ideas which are summarized in the diagram there. And I can only say, ladies and gentlemen, it was really a pleasure for me to stand before you and facilitate the PhD seminar series in business management. Our first topic has been on getting a sense of the PhD terrain, and in my next workshop I'll continue with the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a nice time. Stay well and stay safe. Bye.